15. Five, 4.
Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. And today we're coming to you from the fabulous studios of Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and that's at 537 West 59th. I'm particularly excited to have with me today somebody who is equally exciting to all of this public access work and healing work, and that's Cher Carden. Cher, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. I have lots to talk about today.
Well, you know what really thrills me? I'm so interested in location. That's why I wanted people to see the wide shot of why we do things, of how this set is at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I live in Gramercy Park, and you work 1 block away from me.
Yes.
And I met Jane Goldberg on a radiation hormesis talk up in the Upper West Side. But sooner or later, it's those physical locations where you connect and you work together and you meet people. And I know you're multi-talented. You not only have these great abilities as a wellness consultant working at La Casa, that's 41 East 20th Street, between Park and Broadway, and I'm between Park and 3rd.
Oh, so you were very close by.
Yeah, we're really close.
But they
But
say there's no accidents in life, right?
Yeah.
We're all meant to meet each other.
yeah,
for a
but
reason.
we work. I know that you have had such a fascinating journey, and you just listened to me interviewing Jane.
Yes.
And even though you've worked with her for years, I sense you learned something just in this discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
And it inspires you, you said, to talk about what you want to talk about. So you want to give me, first of all, your impressions of that show?
Oh, of course,
And then how
I'd
it
love to.
relates.
When I was born, I think I came out of the womb with a to-do list in my hand. Okay, Mommy, now it's time to go to nursery school, and then I'm going to go to elementary school.
So it was a scream of saying, I got a lot on my agenda here.
I do. I have a lot on my agenda, and you were just saying that I do. I'm very fortunate in this life to have a lot of creative abilities, and I've also given myself a chance to learn a great deal regarding various elements of spiritual, emotional, and physical health and well-being. And one of them is that I went to graduate school and received a master's degree in counseling. And I also used to be, when I lived in New Jersey, I was certified as an alcoholism educator and counselor. And through my experience, not only of the information that I learned in school, and also certainly through my experience as a counselor, as well as my own unfolding of the onion peel of humanness that made up who I am, and to discover what was underneath all of that, relates very much to what Jane was saying about how we come into this world as aggressive beings. And that depending on what we picked up from our parents and how we have constructed our life based on what happened when we were children, our experiences of what happened as a child, then we can either use that aggressiveness in a constructive way, or we can also use it in a destructive way, either against others or against ourselves. And I think I think as a child I learned how to not take it out on others, but I definitely was taking things out on myself. And I grew up in a dysfunctional family environment, and there was a lot of aggressive behavior that I experienced and saw and was experienced and received. Plus, growing up in the 60s and 70s was a very volatile time.
Right.
And
it was an exciting time.
It was a very exciting time. It was a great time of unfolding and opening up and transformation, a tremendous time of transformation, and truth-telling. And I think that being a child of the 60s and 70s, even though there was an awful lot of oppression and there was a lot of conflict and challenge regarding my own experience of my family environment, but also my experience of being an African-American woman. And
you're also
and my
Mohawk and Swedish, because you said you get your good complexion from
Yes,
all of these sources. I didn't know Mohawk.
That's right, yeah.
Mohawk Indian, right?
Yes, yes, that's
right. Are they
right,
known for good complexion?
Well, I think American Indians are known for also the facial structure. I mean, you can kind of see that there's, the
High
bone
cheekbones,
structure. Yeah. And yes, I have Swedish and African American and French and all these blends in me. And I think that as a result of all that, I can't help but look at the many elements of life because there's so much that went into who I am. And given that I was, like I said, a child of the 60s and 70s, and during a time of unfolding and opening up, I was able to really become a very introspective person.
Oh.
And
well, meditation was sort of happening then too. Or
yes, that's right. And I've been doing yoga and meditation since I was in high school.
Oh, really?
And I was involved in a lot of the drug education programs to bring in alternative information and choice into the school when I was in high school, and I was what they called a peer counselor.
Oh, really?
And so I learned about yoga, and I also learned about meditation then.
Was it transcendental meditation? Because they were the ones doing the studies.
No, I don't think so.
No, not necessarily.
I just had various teachers who taught us how to meditate, and I also,
Really?
gravitated to books and classes on the subject
Really?
as I got older.
You know, I had a teacher in high school. It was a girls' school, and they didn't have the same requirements as a public school. So she was able to jump out of grad school in biology to help put her husband through his PhD program. She studied under Gunther Stent, who was a great molecular biologist.
Yes.
So even though I was only in 11th grade, we read Watson Crick's Molecular Biology of the Gene. And now that I'm doing this DVD with Jane on radiation hormesis, we have some of the scientists to try to, scratch their heads and understand why these rocks work. And we can talk about that later, but I know you've had some very dramatic experience with that.
Yes.
So these teachers that taught you meditation in high school, what was it, English or math
No,
teachers?
it didn't happen in the classroom. It happened more so through programs that came into the school that were helping us to
Afterwards,
develop drug and alcohol education programs in school.
Yeah, because my biology teacher never told me she'd met Maharishi then. She just she didn't think they could handle it.
Right, yeah.
Because years later, I got that feeling from meditation. I thought, I haven't had this feeling since high school biology.
Yes.
So even though she wasn't talking about meditation, she radiated that enthusiasm of life.
I see, yes.
So, but
so it sounds like you actually picked up on that energy within her as you,
Many years later.
Yeah.
And then I found out at a reunion, I said, were you doing meditation? Oh, yeah, we were just with Maharishi up in Lake Tahoe. I thought, wow.
Oh,
So then, but the program you did was to kind of help kids get off of drugs, like marijuana and things like that?
Yes, and other drugs and alcohol.
That sounds very progressive.
Yes, and actually that probably was for the year, because that was in the early 1970s that I got involved in that. And even after I left high school, I eventually went back into that field again. I think
Which high school?
I went to Madison High School in Madison, New Jersey. And also, I was going to tie that in with something else that Jane said about the aggressive behavior and how you turn that against yourself. Even though I learned some of these things at a young age, some of it I wasn't able to truly apply to my life because there was too much fear and anger and sadness and mourning going on within me. And as I got older, I discovered that I had cancer. And at 24 years old, I had cervical cancer. Now, as a child growing up, I was in and out of depression, and I had suicidal thoughts quite often as I was growing up. And so even though I was very quiet through most of my childhood, but I came out of myself a little bit in high school. And one of the things I actually learned in high school that stayed with me, that helped me in a way towards my own self-therapy, was theater. And I got very involved in the acting classes. We did one show after another. I also joined the choir, and I started to write. I started to write poetry and short stories. I became editor of the creative magazine in school. So I just delved into the creative part of myself, mainly because in my family, children are meant to be seen but not heard. I had no voice as a child growing up. So the way that I got in touch with my voice was through creative means. And then as I got older, I realized that I had still found ways to box in my rage. And so...
Really?
Yes. Even
How old were you when you realized that?
I would say probably mid to late 20s. I became more and more aware of it.
Do you think
I had
that
a
the
very
cervical
nice
cancer
facade.
Thing, did the cancer...
Yes, that was certainly a part of it. That was certainly a part of
in?
it, yeah. In high school, I discovered that an actor has to understand themselves. Because the more they understand themselves and allow themselves to be introspective, the more they understand the human experience. And the more they understand that, then it's easier to interpret the character that they're playing. Well, I know how that must feel for them because I went through something similar. Or I know what rage feels like. I've had rage in my life, and I remember incidents that led me to feeling that way.
Right.
So therefore, I can contact the humanness of that character. They're not just words on a script, but they have a being, they have a life. And I can tap into that life. And when I discovered that I had cancer at 24, I began to become aware of how I had suppressed different parts of myself. And I had also, and I didn't realize this, I had boxed myself into an understanding of what it is to be a hero in life, to be to the rescue all the time, you know, and to be the person who's really liked, the person has a great personality, the person gets A's on everything. You know, some people act out, that's the way they act out what's going on in their dysfunctional home. They act out, and there's others
the rescuer,
who,
huh?
yes, those others who become the rescuer. Then there's also others who take it out on themselves through another ailment, such as an eating disorder, or they develop a substance abuse problem, or they have mental illness. And everyone in the family is actually showing a different part of that dysfunctional behavior. There may be one person who seems to be acting out the most, but everyone is actually a part of this experience.
The same play, the same dysfunctional
Right, exactly,
play.
yeah. If you have an alcoholic, you know, you shake any family tree and an alcoholic will fall out.
Right.
You know, all of us know, as soon as you hear the word alcoholic, you go, oh, Aunt Susie, or oh, my friend who used to sit back behind me in homeroom, and I remember how he used to act out and he'd be drunk in class or whatever, you know? And this domino of events goes off in your head. And you remember what it was like to be around that person. And you might feel that you had anger come up around that person, or you had sadness come up around that person. But what I had done is, because I had so much exposure to dysfunctional behavior, that I had to learn some way to cope with that. And for me, I became stoic. And I became the hero. And because of that, I found a way to survive. I found a way to be able to interact in life. And so when I got older, I didn't realize that I hadn't learned how to handle the anger. I hadn't learned how to truly nurture myself. I can nurture others, but not nurture myself. And hence, I created cervical cancer, which is, of course, involving the uterus. And when the uterus has to do with your creative ability. And every time I would start off to New York to create my life as an actress and a singer, which is what my original career choice was, I would get cancer. And it happened twice in my life. Because I hadn't...
Yeah, but what about the miracle that you overcame cancer?
Yes, and I also overcame it.
Because
and
even
the way,
that first time, you said, no, don't cut
That's
out.
right.
They wanted to cut it all out.
Yes, and thank goodness I was aware enough to be able to realize that I really had choice in life, that I didn't have to be a victim like I was as a child.
You certainly didn't learn that in the hospital, though, when the doctor's telling you. They're probably thinking you're making the worst choice imaginable, so you have to stand up to that.
No, but I had done a little bit of therapy, and I'd also taken something called the S training many, many years ago when I first got out of college. And that helped me, because I knew that I had tremendous emotion and I had no idea how to deal with it. I just knew it was there. I could feel it percolating in me.
So you could probably relate to when Jane was talking about turning it against your body?
Exactly. And I think that's what happened. You know, when I found out I had cancer the second time, the first time there was a youthful defiance, like, you can't do that to me.
Right.
You can't make a victim out of me. I'm 24 years old. You're going to remove my uterus? I don't think so. So some of it was a little bit out of arrogance. You know?
Well, you know, sometimes that's healthy. Healthy arrogance is a good thing.
Yeah.
You know?
And
that can-do attitude?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. And so I found a way to heal myself naturally, which I had explained to you before. I went to a place called Clymer Health Clinic in Pennsylvania, which miraculously I had just been told about that through someone else a few weeks later. You know, they say when the student's ready to learn, the teacher appears.
When the student's ready,
you know,
the teacher's
and
there.
my life has been one experience after another that is very much like that. Every time I raise my hand and say, God, can you teach me something? You know, God always presents to me a teacher or an answer to the problem that I'm about to have or I'm starting to experience having. And I did magnetherm therapy there, which is a vibrational therapy that you place on the area of health challenge, and it vibrates your cells back to their original integrity. And so I learned on a physical basis how to heal myself physically, and thank goodness that worked very well without medical intervention.
No, you really explained well about like the pulse magnetic, that your body has a rhythm, and if it gets off, just that electricity going through can kind of...
Exactly. We
Yeah,
all,
I really
everything
got
in
it.
life has a rhythm.
Yeah.
And, you know, plants have a rhythm, and human beings have a rhythm, and our, let's say our rhythm goes like this. And then through all the things that happen in life, whether, you know, your stresses, a fall, an injury, an accident, medications that you're taking, foods that have filled with pesticides, or ways in which you've been poisoned somehow in life through chemicals or pollution, what have you, that rhythm may get thrown off. You know, your rhythm may be, you know, you just feel like something's not quite right.
Yeah.
And
I think
what
the
happened?
kahunas say all healing is about being in breath. They call it being in breath. It's
Yes. Yes. And that's so interesting. I'm going to take a side for a minute.
Yeah.
For those people watching, just think about it. What is the first thing you do when you come home? As soon as you close, you unlock the door, you walk in the door, you close the door. You take a deep breath, right? And that kind of suggests what we're not doing during the day.
Right.
And that's breathing.
Right. So it's not just bowel movements at home.
That's right.
That we
It's
can
also
do we can
that's
breathe
right.
everywhere.
That's so
maybe
very
that's
true. Very,
Maybe
very
that's
true.
true.
Yeah. Okay, so I took several asides. No, which way do I go to get back to what I was saying? Oh, when I got older, at 32, cancer came back. And even though I had learned about the physical nature of why I got ill, I didn't quite learn about the emotional and spiritual reasons why. And again, I moved to New York to become an actress and singer.
No, but you said in your late 20s you were realizing that you were still, even
Living
though
in
you
a
thought
box.
you were out of the box, you were still
Yeah.
in a box. So
Yes.
you were tuning into that even before the second round of cancer.
Yes, that's true. And I also use meditation, and I also do a lot of chanting work and a lot of Hindu chants. And I also opened up, and this is a whole nother story we'll have to talk about in another show.
Yeah,
I opened up as a trance channel in my late 20s.
Oh.
And when you do that kind of opening up, it's, like I said, it's an onion peel of peeling away all of your defenses and all of your facades in life. And underneath that is what I would call more of a sense of truth, whatever that is for you. And when I was 32 and I had cancer again, I had to take a look at why I was creating this. Because every time I went for what I really wanted in life, I would create a huge obstacle. And I didn't realize it, but I had negative thoughts in the back of my head. I had everyone in my life, including myself, believe that I was such a positive person. But in the back of my head, I realized I had a great deal of negative thoughts about myself. I remember walking down the street one day, and I forgot to do something, and I heard a voice in the back of my head say, "Oh, you jerk, you forgot that." And I thought, "Oh, that's not me. I'm not a jerk. Am I a jerk? No." And then I started to listen to that voice in the back of my head, and I was amazed to find out how many negative thoughts I had. And I didn't realize it, but I had a very big thought that was, I don't deserve better. And I didn't know that. I did not know I had that thought. And I didn't realize how attached to suffering I was. I'd always wanted to shed and get rid of suffering. Get away, go away from me. But I didn't realize how much I was actually running away from it. Right. And when I realized that, then the avalanche of sadness and grief and anger came up. And I had so many health problems that were affecting me in so many ways over an 8-month period. I really thought I was going to die. And I was ready to call a lawyer and to have a will written up. And I went to so many different doctors and practitioners to find out what was wrong with me, and no one came up with an answer within that first 8 months. And I had a lot of aches, I had a lot of pains, I had feelings where I was going to faint any moment. I felt like I was somehow out here desperately trying to get back inside my body to feel what it was like to feel like Cher Carden again. Wow. And one of the things that I did is, I had already opened up as a trance channel and I was doing all these meditation classes and things. I stood in front of the mirror, and I remembered an old acting class that I had taken in high school.
Can you explain what trance channel means for those viewers?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Channeling is, or trance channeling, is when you let go of your consciousness and allow another being to come in and speak through you. And some
Are you
people,
aware of the being speaking through you? Because Jay-Z
sometimes,
Knight isn't even aware of it.
Sometimes, but most of the time I'm out. And I actually come in and out of consciousness. It's like a dream. And for me...
You would think that would be stressful on the body.
And no, I didn't feel it was stressful on the body at all, but it was very stressful for me emotionally.
Okay.
And which I'll get into another time, because that's a whole other thing.
It's a huge topic.
But when I was looking, I remembered this acting exercise, and it was basically asking yourself who you are, and that helped you to get to an understanding of who the character was. And so I stood in front of the mirror and I said, there is some reason why you've created cancer, especially a second time. Why do you think that is? And so I looked in the mirror and I said, who are you? And then I said, who am I? Instead of keeping it out there, who are you? I kept it back in here, who am I? And the more I looked at myself in the mirror, the more I experienced fear. And I started to answer the obvious questions, like, oh, well, I'm a student, I'm a sister, or, well, I'm not a sister in real life, but I mean, I'm a child, I'm a friend, and I'm an African American, I'm a woman, I'm a black woman, whatever. Girl, that's right, yeah. All those obvious things. And then I started to notice how my mind would get distracted. And I would say, oh, look at that pimple, or, oh, I don't look very good, I'm having a bad hair day, or something like that. And I realized, you realize what you're doing? That you're actually distracting yourself from the exercise so you don't get to look at the fear. And so then I took a deep breath, and then the tears just started to fall out of me like an avalanche. And I discovered I had overwhelming loneliness. And I wanted somehow to find a way to love that part of me, or to find someone who would love me enough that loneliness would start to disappear and dissipate, so that I could discover what it'd be like to actually feel like a normal person. Because I realized that on top of all that loneliness, I had all this activity going on that kept me separate from who I really was. Right. And then when I discovered the loneliness, then I discovered the anger that I had around that, about specific events that happened in my life that made me feel so lonely, that made me feel so isolated, that made me feel so undeserving of being loved. And because if you feel undeserving of being loved, it's pretty difficult to really allow love. I had people in my life who loved me, but did I ever let that in? No. No, I didn't really let that in. I would find some funny joke or something to displace that, or deflect the love coming in. Yeah. And so the more I did that, the more I got in touch with the emotion. And there were times when my body was shaking. I was so fearful and so angry.
Was this one session?
No, this happened over, I would say, a period of about 6 months.
That's amazing. And how often would you do it?
I would try to do it every day or every other day. And it wasn't easy.
Grueling.
I mean, there were times when I just did not want to be in touch with it.
Do you think if you had other guidance, somebody would medicate you? And then you wouldn't be able to have those feelings?
Probably. I mean, there have been times in my life where doctors have wanted to medicate me because I had anxiety, but or I would fall in and out of depression. But I never wanted to go that. I never wanted to go that route.
Maybe when you were young they weren't doing it, but I think today they just swoop someone up straight away. And
oh yeah.
But you always had some huge rock of guidance inside you to say no?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I understand the question that comes up in your mind when you hear this, my saying these things.
I'm not for medication, but I'm not against it either. I'm just, Jane didn't want to be on the panel with this person from St. Mark's, but I keep thinking St. Mark's is sort of a church that's known for artists coming by and probably homeless people and people that are hungry, and probably a lot of them have a lot of problems. Yeah. And the idea of keeping them on their meds might be a little handier than having them act out, like Jane was saying, the adolescent ward when she was studying. So I'm kind of open, and here I'm hearing you going through a session that you would think you'd need guidance on, and yet you had enough self-discipline to stay in front of the mirror to let all this grief come out.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is because I do believe that I was that I've been divinely protected all of my life. I had many experiences as a child where I would see golden white light in the room, and I had a very strong and powerful relationship with Christ, even though there were times in my life when I've truly suppressed that. And but I would always somehow come back to it. And
was it considered not African American? I know I've been in some circles to say that Jesus was a trip that the white man pushed on the black man. Was it
there are
because of
some,
that?
yeah, there are some African Americans who believe that, and I have been exposed to that point of view. But that's not the way I was raised. My parents both had very strong beliefs in God. We didn't go to church regularly, though. My mother was Episcopal, and my father was Methodist, and they could never agree which church they were going to take me to. So we ended up not going. We went on holidays, but that was about it. And but my mother did give me books to read. There was one book called They Called Him Master, which is a very, very old book. And it's a wonderful book, and then also The Greatest Story Ever Told.
Right.
And I read those as a very young child. So I had some idea of who Christ was, and I had some idea that there was more to life than the physicalness of this chair. I knew that there were questions that I had in life that somehow, someday, I'd have to answer. But at least I was aware of the question.
Right.
And I also knew I had a lot of psychic experiences as a child. I had a lot of astral projection experiences. I would, close my eyes and open them and not be asleep, and I'd find myself somewhere else.
Right, so you probably knew pretty early in the game that most professionals probably couldn't even comprehend where you were coming from.
That's true, and I was also smart enough not to tell many people either.
Yeah.
If I told people I heard voices and saw visions.
Yeah. Exactly.
I can just imagine where I'd be now. I'd be one of those people that Jane was talking about in the mental institution.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, my mother had spent time in a mental institution when I was in high school, so I kind of knew how
where not to be.
Certain therapists would view what I was going through.
Yeah.
And I also saw her under medication. So, and I could see how that suppressed her ability to be in touch with her true emotions. Because she was also a person who had a tremendous capacity for love, but had deep, deep loneliness and deep anger. And so did her mother. Her mother was deeply lonely. And so I noticed, the pattern from grandma to my mother to myself.
Cher, we only have a minute left for this show, so I just want to say thank you for joining me on the show. And thank you for joining me, all the viewers, farther down the rabbit hole with Cher. And we're going to have another show with you.
Okay.
So we can go into these topics even more deeply.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. So there we go. Maybe come out with the wide shot to remind people that we're coming to you from Manhattan Neighborhood Network, these wonderful studios at 537 West 59th, and other people should be getting their own public access shows, because that's what democracy depends on. Free expression, and here we are.
And if I could say this also, I'm sure there's some people who are relating to some of the things that we talked about today, and they might be like in a state of feeling like, gosh, I want to know more about this. And so I've dedicated a large part of my life to helping people who are going through these transitions and these struggles. And if we can put up my phone number at the end of this program.
Sure. Yeah, say it out.
My number is 212-242-5127, and my business is called Vibrant Spirit Quest, and I'm all about helping people to discover mastery in their lives and how they can enhance the vibrancy of the quality of their life.
Cher, you just got to get a series here on M&N, because then you can have call-ins and people will have access.
Okay.
So thank you. And we can call that a wrap. I guess that's 28 minutes. I hope. I love the set. And then we'll
maybe
do
at
show
the bottom
2.
we can also show
Let's do
my
a second
website.
show.
Cher, you want to say different tape?
Yeah, different tape, otherwise it won't fit on.
And if it's possible, can we
Do you want to do a show, Alan? Oh, we forgot to do this.